because you don't get any notification when it's live. But I will tell you when it's officially live. But until then, it could be live now. So we'll just
How will you know when it's officially live?
right. We're live. So over to you, Mr. Nadell.
Paul might have pressed the right buttons, and we might now be live with Love Cars on the Grid, where tonight we're going to look back at a weekend where Magical Max made it 4 wins in a row at Imola. Indianapolis provided the most amazing drama over the weekend, and that was just the qualifying weekend. Sebastian Ogier took his 7th Rally Portugal win. Formula E actually entertained in Tokyo. Christopher Bell steals $1 million from Joey Logano in the NASCAR All-Stars race. We had World Superbikes in the Czech Republic, British Superbikes at Donington. We also catch up on the youngsters in the latest round of the GB3 single-seaters who were over at Zandvoort last weekend. So an amazing match, amazing motorsport. And Paul, I'm sure you're glued to the screen all weekend. Glued.
I watched lots.
The Grand Prix was really good, wasn't it? I mean, I came back because I was up at this place called Everton, where a lot of blue smoke was in the air, valiantly supporting the mighty Saints. So I wasn't watching it all live.
You just say that. That's the two bang average teams. Everton are going to hate me for that. The Toffee's going to hate me for that. But that's one of the most memorable games you'll ever go to in your life because it was the last. For those of you who know football trivia, Everton, Goodison Park has been in the top division longer than any other, the actual stadium, longer than any other stadium in the UK. And Tiff went to the last ever game that's going to be played there, although they are going to play ladies football there. But
anyway, I've been catching up rapidly. So I've been spent.
I did. I watched lots. I watched. You didn't mention F2, F3.
Well, no, they're coming. Yeah, they'll come.
Yeah, I watched.
There weren't any supercars.
I watched lots of that. But do you know one thing I did notice over the weekend? There were lots of crashes. But I think we should. Let's start with a crash. Let's start with Yuki, and let's start with
Yuki. Formula One. Yeah, yes. I thought you meant Indianapolis. We'll come with those crashes later. But the Yuki. Well, that was just a crash. I think the bit overdid it. He just hit the tyre barrier and rolled over a couple of times. I mean, it's a fairly normal crash, and Yuki admitted his error, which is unusual in racing drivers. And of course, but I mean, he was on the pace, Yuki. Well, within a tenth or 2 or 3 of Max, which for him is good. And then he went for the big one, and it didn't work.
Well, do you know what, Tiff? What I like is the fact that Imola, which is it's not the best track in the world for racing nowadays, but what I like about it is that it's got gravel for runoffs.
Yeah.
So if they make a mistake, they get penalised.
Yeah.
They get because they're so used to going wide on this massive expanse of tarmac or concrete, whatever it may be, and they get penalised. I love it.
That's how it should be. I mean, when the left wheel leaves the grey stuff, the right wheel should be in the gravel. And that's if they make the curb as wide as a car, it's quite simple, isn't it? Then because you're off the track.
You're right. Although I did feel sorry for Alex Albon. We'll come on to the main race shortly, but he just sounded such a lovely lad. He said, "Well, that's not fair." when he was
about what?
When he was forced wide by was it Charles or one?
In the race,
in the race.
Yeah. But that was the only real drama qualifying, really, wasn't it? It was Yuki's role. Otherwise, the usual tension up front as they go for this one more lap, and they're all separated by thousands and hundreds of thousandths. And of course, Oscar was the fastest McLaren again, and Lando made a mistake, and George went and put Lando down to 4th. So there's always drama in qualifying nowadays because they are so close, except for Ferrari, who qualified. What was it, 11th and 12th Ferrari?
No, it's so bad in front of the Tifosi as well. It's just so bad. But then the problem is, especially on a circuit like that, you're mid-pack. And it's a bit of a lottery. Yeah. You can easily lose a wing or get a puncture or something on that.
Ollie Behrman didn't get through. I think his lap. I mean, this is when the FIA and Formula One really pissed me off because in IndyCar, if there's an incident off that deserves, they go pace car all the time in America. Any incident. But if people are on qualifying runs or they're about to have a stop for a scheduled tyre change, and if the crash is just a car in the barrier, not near the track, where the marshals stay behind. They don't throw the red until people have all had a chance to finish things off instead of ruining people's races. Because, the I don't know, where was the crash that he had? I don't know which corner he was at. But the point is, they know from their timing screens all the cars that are past the yellow flag zone. Obviously, anyone coming up to the yellow flag zone, their times are deleted. But the few cars that were ahead between the crash zone and the start-finish line, they could just hold the red flag until those people have completed their laps. It's going to be about another 10 seconds, another 20 seconds, and all the cars that are through the yellow flags. I remember seeing someone, our British drivers in Baku or something, coming down that huge long straight about to get pole position, and he was like 100 yards from the finish line, and they threw the reds. Just have some common sense occasionally.
But that's hard. That's hard to manage, isn't it? And then if you're scrambling the
yellow flags
team,
you don't know. But if it's not a huge shunt,
yeah,
the marshal's post will say current barrier driver okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've got your TV screen.
I get it. If it's not,
you've got your monitors. You've got those.
I thought you were referring to like a major thing.
No. Okay. Like Yuki's crash. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
He's out of the car already. Out of the car. He's fine.
Well, no, he's hopefully stays in the car because you don't want people getting out of cars anymore. But you've got those little maps, the little red coloured blobs. You know where the crash is, and all the little blobs, just let them finish their lap.
Yeah.
Oh. So
yes. they do that already in IndyCar, do they?
Yeah, pretty much. You see it, even in the race situation, when people all change for tires, and half the field, or NASCAR, even both of them, I think, they won't. They'll try to not ruin someone's race, that's inches from a finishing line or something. They've got to be more common sense in America. They don't panic and have rule books that are so precise that every millisecond is checked. I mean, they're as bad as VAR in football. VAR is running football. But it's the same thing happening in motorsport.
Well, look, if you want to talk about rules and the FIA, look at what's happening now. They're worried sick about Carlos Sainz Sr. potentially coming in and stirring things up. God. So they're going to change the rule book.
Yes.
we got to.
Moving on. We've got a motorsport
tonight because we're live. We've got a top chat, and the top chat is from Oliver saying, not my Oliver Iverson, saying Tiff the legend. How about that?
Well, that's very kind. Very kind.
Cheers, Oliver.
But I think we move on to Max the legend, because that overtake. I mean, he is just first corner God. He knows the overtaking rules. He knows exactly where his wheels have to be to lead and push people off, or not push people off, or pretend he was pushed off. But his move around the outside of Oscar, I mean, how he made the corner, and Oscar must have braked a tad too early, and Max just took his foot off the brakes for half a second, probably, and dived around the outside, and the race was won from then on. I mean, Red Bull seemed to be able to just, on Saturday nights or Friday nights, find the key to their car each week. On Friday, they're moaning, we're so slow everywhere, and I could do one lap fast, but in the race, McLaren's will kill us. And then they just bossed the race. I mean, it was an incredible performance.
You're saying like the royal we. You're saying they. It's not they. It's always Max. It's not the other driver. Max is on a different level.
But the engineer with Max. They mean the Red Bull team and Max together.
Max's car, Max's engineer, Max's.
Yes. Yeah.
Because he's just unbelievable. And if people didn't realize he was the real deal, when he's last week's and all the stuff that came about that GT3 car at the Nordschleife, and then he's messing around after qualifying. He's doing sim racing, WEC or whatever it is, sim racing, and then he goes wins a Grand Prix.
But the Grand Prix was going to be a bit of a bore by the looks of it. I didn't watch it all live until the VSC came out, and then things started jumbling up, and then they had a full safety car, which jumbled things up even more. And all that, the only real change was, I think, it just helped Lando finally get one over Oscar, which I think we all hoped for, not just because we're British or biased, but I think we want the championship to go a bit longer. We've yet to have a head-to-head McLaren battle. That's the one we're really looking forward to, when they do pull away from Max by 10 seconds.
Same tyres, same strategy.
Tires, yeah. Well, not the same strategy. Obviously, one of them can choose, which Oscar probably did. Oscar decided he didn't want to stay out on old tyres, didn't want to risk that. So that caught Oscar out, the full safety car. It was interesting. I was raging, but do you understand why it was a full safety car and not just a virtual safety car like the first breakdown?
No,
someone's written, because I was raging. The commentators, because I was listening to it on the radio coming back from Liverpool, and they were saying, well, it's exactly the same car park spot, and the first one was just virtual safety car. Now they've gone full. The reason it was Ocon the first one to break down, because Ocon, they said he parked in the same place where there's a gap in the armco where the marshals will push the car in, but there's only room for one car. And the next car parking space was 100 metres up the hill on the grass.
See.
And so the marshals couldn't push, the other was Mercedes.
Kimi.
They couldn't push his car. So that is why it had to go full, which I understand.
Wow, what are the chances?
We'll make the car.
What are the chances? Two cars on the same
that's
straight?
why the commentary on the radio was raging, because they kept on saying it's the same part of the track, same place, and yet now it's a full course. That is the reason. So there you go. You can't.
I watched on Sky, and it had instead of Crofty and Martin Brundle, it had Harry and Davidson, and they're brilliant. Okay. Really, really knowledgeable and passionate. Yeah, it was good. Who's on the radio commentary?
Edwards. We get Edwards on. And I'm not sure who his sidekick was who was doing most of the technical.
Harry Benjamin often does Radio 5 as well when he's not.
It was Ben Edwards. It was Ben Edwards this time, so I don't know. I think it was Ben anyway. But yes, the other incident was obviously, Albon was heading for fourth, and Albon, having got fifth in the end, wasn't when he was pushed back by the Ferrari when Lewis did it. Lewis was alive in the second half. That was the other story, wasn't it? Leclerc was told on the radio, "We've got no tyres that will last 15 laps." Did you hear that communication? We had that on the radio.
Crazy.
We haven't got it. You've got to stay out on what you've got. And then Lewis, enjoying his car on the softer tyre, came storming up behind. Albon was trying to get by Leclerc, wasn't he? And then when Albon made the move around the outside, Leclerc pushed him wide, and then Lewis took them both. So I think, because Albon was thinking if he got by Leclerc, he might be able to catch Oscar. I think he had a podium in his brain.
Yeah.
And I always love when Williams do well. Maybe it's just a British thing because we all love Sir Frank Williams and his memory and everything. But, the fact that they were fifth and eighth, weren't they? Sainz had some problems, dropped back. But so great points for Williams again.
Sainz got a bit he was just one of the ones who got a bit unlucky with the
shenanigans.
Yeah, exactly.
The Aston Martins, all this big excitement, fifth and eighth on the grid and 11th and 15th in the race, which is poor old Fernando, one position away from getting a point in 2025.
So I saw some stats on him, and it says that he hasn't. The stats were mind blowing. It was saying that he hasn't won a Grand Prix, I think, since 2012, and he hasn't won a single point this year for Aston Martin. And is he too old? Should he be there? Should a young driver go in? No. It's a bit hard when you got someone of that talent and that stature.
So Yuki got back to 10th, which is obviously quite a good result for him. As it had Hadjar, another very solid. He was running 5th or 6th at times. It ended up 9th, which is where he started. Lawson still probably not enjoying being a Grand Prix driver very much, probably. I think he always had some reason why he didn't qualify, because something wasn't right or this and that. But he really does need him. Because Hadjar was like the sort of 5th choice for Red Bull, wasn't he? And he was sort of, the last one in, as it were, before they shut the door on this year's driver selection. Lawson was like number 2, and Hadjar creeps in at number 4. And now he's delighted everybody with his attitude, the way he races, and he's been a real star.
You remember how it started as well? Binning on the outlet.
And of course, Mercedes were off the pace. Gorgeous George, third on the grid. And then he just, I didn't follow the race closely, obviously. I don't know why did he just slip back because of tyres, and the virtual safety car caught him out, and everything caught him out.
Yeah, they just weren't on it really. He went down to 4th straight away. Yeah, just sort of drifted away. Normally George is always there, isn't he? He kind of sweeps up a podium.
But it looked like a really entertaining Grand Prix. Well, pretty entertaining. It's a good 7 or 8 out of 10, would you say, the Grand Prix for excitement? And,
it was, considering the only frustration for me is that there's only one place really. Although lots of people were overtaking on the outside, but yeah. So they only
overtake when they got tyre differential. That's the problem. You're on the same tyres, even the DRS won't get you past. It has to be tyre deg, the dreaded tyre trick.
I'd have loved to have seen because Lando came into the pits first. He had first dibs. He was in front, and then he got new tyres. Then Oscar didn't get new tyres, so I would love to have seen him get new tyres and then both have a race to the end. That would have been really exciting.
Yeah, but if they both had new tyres, they wouldn't have overtaken each other.
Yeah,
that's
true.
On that circuit, because Imola just hasn't that many overtaking spots. Sadly, everyone loves Imola. It's a great, looking track, great crowd, and got a lot of history, both good and terrible history, obviously. And I suppose the last Imola Grand Prix, maybe forever. A bit like, going out to Everton. I was up at Everton for the last, and that was something. Good Formula 2, Formula 3 stuff. I mean, you haven't got any more Formula 1 stories. Jack Crawford had a front row, qualified ninth fastest, but sticks on the front row for the reverse grid race, which he won. He did get from ninth to sixth in the main race. So he was pretty much on the pace, Jack Crawford. So he had a good American driver. But the feature race was fantastic. I saw that catching up. Because Alex Dunn, this Irishman that's just coming alive. It's funny, you see, Alex Dunn, he was a superstar. He won the 2022 British Formula 4 Championship easily. He was second in GB3 in 2023, but won a lot of races. And everyone was raving about this young Irish kid. He's only 19 now. But then he had an awful year in Formula 3 and just sort of disappeared backwards. What team was he in? I forget where he ended up in Formula 3 in the end. But now, he was 14th in the Formula 3 Championship last year. But now he's got a Formula 2 drive with Roden. He's got a good car. He's happy with the car. And all of a sudden, that talent we all saw before, has leapt to the front. He had a great race, made some overtakes, got to the front, and battled us all the way to the finish. So really good drive for Alex Dunn. And it's terrifying how, if you don't get that right team that you click with, if he'd stuck, it's terrifying as a young driver. And of course, second, and a real British one too. We had, not British. Sorry, Alex. Is Alex British or Irish?
Irish.
No, Alex is Irish. Yeah. So an English-British second was with Luke Browning as well. He fought through, followed Dunn, sorted a few cars out in the pit lane. Some of the overtaking happened there. And of course, the great thing with Luke Browning, my great relief, was of course he's in a high-tech car. And a week ago, I was really worried with all the Oaks brothers business going on, that own high-tech, that there might be, cars impounded or whatever. We still don't know really what's going on with that saga, with the Oaks brother, William being arrested. So it's wonderful to see a high-tech team there, and Luke Browning, who's a Williams protege as well, finishing second in the main Formula 2 race.
It's quite interesting at the end of that. So they use the same warm down room as the Formula 1 guys. The room they go in, the podium guys go in. But loads of other drivers came in as well, which was quite nice actually to see. They were sort of coming in. I don't know whether it's because it's cool, air conditioned. They grab a water, one of those towels with Imola on it. But
I would like that if I was a podium man. I'd say, get us our moment.
I earned this room.
Yeah, this is like the VIP room.
You never ever would see that with Formula 1, but it was quite interesting. There was another sort of 3 or 4 drivers in there.
We haven't got any British front runners, unfortunately, in Formula 3, where the reverse grid was run by the German Tim Tremenitz, who was qualified 11th, but had a front row grid position for this reverse grid race and turned it into a win. It was his second sprint win. He's won 2 sprint wins, but none others. Actually, talking about sprint wins, I was annoyed again, as I always am with sprint reverse grids. Because when Franco Colapinto was out and qualified, or practice, I just saw someone saying, Colapinto, the only one on the grid that's had 2 wins in Formula 3 and 2 wins in Formula 2 at Imola. All 4 of them reverse grid races. So he hadn't had a win like the feature race, which was a really good feature because this Brazilian, Rafael Camaro, won the Formula Regional Europe last year and looks really, really talented. Everyone's raving about him. He's won the first 2 feature races. He's on pole position at Imola. But although he had this great battle with the Mexican Santiago Ramos, he eventually fell back and I think he overdid his tyres and he finished 3rd behind his teammate, the Dane teammate, Noah Stromstead. So really good racing with those 3. And Camara beat him for the first time this year. But then, for a different type of drama, we have to go across the Atlantic Ocean, the pond, as it says, for the IndyCar qualifying weekend, which there was more drama or more tension, more excitement, I would say, than even a good Grand Prix. And this is just a qualifying weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, because the thing is, the cars from last year, they've got this hybrid, the dreaded hybrid, because manufacturers want them to have hybrid engines, so to keep Honda happy. They put a 40-kilogram lump of battery and hybrid thing in the bell housing between the back of the engine and the gearbox, that little space there between the two. But of course, that's 40 kilograms at the back of the car, which you didn't have when you've had your same chassis, of course, as the last few years. And Takuma Sato was the first to find, this was just in practice about a month ago, Sato just doing the Indy 500, which he's won twice this year, had this massive shunt going in backwards at turn one, destroyed his, he's in the Rahal team from a one-off trip to Indy, absolutely destroyed the car. And then, of course, Kyle Larson, the NASCAR superstar, having another go in a McLaren car. He not only crashed in the test days, but he also had another crash in qualifying, or before qualifying. It was a Saturday morning and another crash in backwards. And we then started this sequence. I mean, we're not talking about sort of one team, losing control, because Sato lost control in a Rahal car, Larson lost control in a McLaren car. Kiffin Simpson had the first qualifying weekend flying sideways in the air in his Ganassi car. Rebuilt, he qualified 15th. Then the Kiwi Marcus Armstrong, one of the quickest in the build-up to the actual qualifying, in his Meyer Shank car, also went round, massive shunt at turn 3, I think, or turn 2. Even Colton Herter, the much valued, is going to be in Formula One next year, maybe with Cadillac. He was in an Andretti car. He lost control, swapped. You see them going through turn 4, and then they swap ends, and you can't see it coming.
They said that it was very windy. They said that there was a gust of wind.
Yeah, a lot of that. But he managed to get out. He had to go into the bump runoff, Armstrong, to get onto the grid. He's on the grid in 32nd, although it's not 32nd, as we'll come to later. And then Scotty McLaughlin, having qualified to get into the fastest 12, because on the Saturday they have the first qualifying. It's the bottom 4 have to wait to the bump session, and the top 12 go through to the Sunday qualifying. So he was in the fast 12, but on Sunday morning, warming up, testing for a run, he had the biggest of the 6 or 7 crashes. And he's the pole position man from last year. He was the fastest in all testing. He was looking to be the pole man this year. Coming out of turn 4, boom, back end swaps. And he was really shaken. A lot of the drivers seemed to manage to sort of not, they try to, I think, walk away, but he, in the crash, had an amazing onboard camera. He put his hands on his head. And he said afterwards he was terrified of going into the catch fencing. That's all he was thinking. Don't go to the fence, don't go to the fence. This is at 230 miles an hour. Incredibly strong cars nowadays because of that. But that meant that he couldn't go into the fast 12 qualifying, which is Sunday morning's first session. So that meant he was going to be 12th on the grid because he'd qualified. But then we had this bizarre beginning of a changing of the world when, after the crash, when they were lining up for the fast 12, and obviously McLaughlin wasn't there in his Penske car, they suddenly noticed Mr. Ganassi spotted something slightly wrong on the backs of the other 2 Penske cars lining up. They were second. Last year, they had the whole front row, all 3 Penske cars. But they'd noticed that on this, it's the rear attenuator plate. So the attenuator is the wire called up system that goes stop the wheels flying in the air. And it's attached to the chassis by plate. And the end of the plate is in the crash zone just under the rear wing. So it's where the tube of carbon fibre comes out the back of the car. And the plate goes on the side of it. And of course, the plate's wider, so it sticks out. So with this little edge of the plate, what they've done is they've blended in some filler. So instead of a 90-degree, tiny little, sticking out bit, they've smoothed it off, just like that. And that's all they've done. But you cannot modify any standard parts in IndyCar. And this was noticed in the pit lane and drawn to the attention of the officials. And the Penske mechanics then started getting a blowtorch out, and tried to scrape it off before someone. Hold on a minute. There's also regulation that you can't change your car at all once you're in the pit lane, ready for qualifying. So the 2 cars were sent back to the garage. That's of Joseph Newgarden, last year's winner, Will Power. 2 of the hot favourites. Yeah. And they were then dropped to 11th and 12th. So that puts McLaughlin up to 10th. So instead of being 12th, it was 10th. But this morning now, everyone was a bit, well, that's not much of a punishment, is it? You've been cheating again, Penske. Now, Penske, Mr. Roger Penske, owns IndyCar. He owns Indianapolis. And he was actually distraught when last year they were caught. They still had their push to pass installed on the computer for the Long Beach race. and they were kicked out of that. And Penske was, very strong opinions of what his team letting him down. So what he's thinking of, and this morning they've kicked them to the back of the grid. They've sent the two of the most likely winners right to 32nd and 33rd on the grid. And they've kicked out the strategists who are so important in an IndyCar race. They've sent them packing. They do that in NASCAR as well. You can't turn up. You're barred from the gate. Your passes is removed. You're not allowed to go to the race. So huge, things happening with Penske there that has sent them to the back of the big news. And funny, if you look at Marshall Pruitt's, follow his Twitter, very good American, follows all American motorsport, and I follow his tweets. If you look at it now, he went into the museum at IndyCar this morning, which is apparently the most amazing. Everyone's raging about this newly refurbished museum. So if you go to Indy, make sure you go there. And he took his camera around last year's winning car of Joseph Newgarden, and he cut the camera to the back of the car and zoomed in on the accentuator plate. And there is the blended in filler.
Wow.
Which is illegal. And so sitting in the museum is an apparently illegal car that won last year's. So not only what's happened this year, that is going to turn everybody's heads that last year's car was, it's a huge thing to happen.
Would they do anything like lawsuit or anything?
No, I don't think they will. I don't know. But so after all that drama for the Fast 12, we then had the Bump 4. This is all about the Indy drama. There's as much television and excitement going on from who's going to be on pole position as to who's not going to be in the race. And the last few years, there's only ever been one person to be kicked out. So the Fast 4 of the Bump 4, 3 would go through and 1 wouldn't. 2 went through quite. Marco Andretti, and 1 more Andretti's in the race, and got through reasonably quickly, and so did Marcus Armstrong in his rebuilt car. But bizarrely, and this is what's amazing about Indy cars and engineers, and we talk about Formula 2 and Formula 3 being in the right team. So by 2 miles an hour slower than the other two was the two, which team is it? And I've got it written there somewhere if I can find my lots of it. No, the Dale Coyne cars. And they were the 2 slowest last year. So, and Rinus VeeKay, one of the drivers, he used to qualify 6th, run 6th or 7th at, Indianapolis. So he knows his way around. And they're full throttle, but they're just slow cars. Rahal had that a couple of years back, huge drama with Bobby Rahal's team. So then it was going to be one of them going out. And the quicker of the 2 was VeeKay, Rinus VeeKay. And then this is lovely drama that happens because who's the other one in the cars? Oh, Jacob Abel. So he was at the front of the queue. So in Indianapolis, you queue to get another run in, right? But you can, if you want, delete your time, and so you've got no time at all, and overtake in the fast lane. So it's a bit like a fast lane bypass. And all of a sudden, VeeKay, that was in the race and saw Abel about to go out again, panicked because he changed his car and he's the same team, and he learnt the team, well, he's made these modifications. He's going to go quicker than you now. So he dumped his time and overtook Abel to get it out before Abel, and tried to set another time, and he set a slower time. And then Abel went out, but he couldn't match the time. The cars were slower. They were still hotter cars, but it was just the amount of drama, TV cameras and the tension building as who was the one person not going to be, in this greatest race of all. But of course, after that, the top 6 from the Fast 12 went out for this final qualifying runs late into the evening. And we had this just fairy tale story of this Israeli-Russian driver, Robert Schwartzman, in the Prema cars. And Prema, they've come to Indy to try out. They're so good at Formula 2 and Formula 3 and Formula 4 and every formula they prepare cars for. So they've launched themselves into America this year. They've been sort of, the 20th and 19th, and, Callum Ilott and Robert Schwartzman, the 2 drivers. They've been nowhere, really. And the first free practice one for this IndyCar week, they were the 2 slowest cars. They'd hardly finished building them into the sort of Indy low-level spec. And gradually through the weekend, Schwartzman especially has become faster and faster and faster. And then did this stunning pole position lap, And funny enough, the second on the grid is Takuma Sato, who hasn't raced for a year, but just is a specialist at Indianapolis. And again, you get this driver fairy tale story. And it was only Schwartzman that stopped him being on pole. And they share the front row of the grid with Pato O'Ward in a McLaren. So just, tears everywhere. Just wonderful drama.
How many Indianapolis 500s have there been?
No idea.
109.
Oh, is it 109? Wow.
I'm surprised that's amazing history, especially for America.
It qualified for Formula One points in the 50s. I don't know how long till, but certainly the 50s, maybe into the 60s. But it's a shame about Schwartzman. Schwartzman, he's a Russian born in Tel Aviv in Israel. And he came to be a Formula 3 champion and Formula 2 runner-up to Oscar Piastri. But just when all the Russian thing was kicking off, and so he was looked down on, and he was a Ferrari test reserve driver, did a lot of those FP1 tests, and always had quick times, a really talented driver.
Yeah, he is.
He ended up in World Endurance Championship last year, one of those Ferrari, the yellow one, the privately entered of the 3 Ferraris. He won at Cota with his team. I think that's with Robert Kubica as well. So he's a driver that probably should have been in Formula One. And then all of a sudden, Prema phoned him up. Would you like to try a bit of IndyCar? And he thought about it. But his interview afterwards, he just said he was scared. He basically said, this team has never run a car on an oval course. They've never raced on any oval track. Schwartzman's never raced on an oval track. And he goes out there and builds up.
Unbelievable.
So wonderful drama. That's what I love about some of IndyCar. And that's a team, it's like a bit like Haas have been doing quite well, but, back of the grid Formula One team suddenly been on pole one weekend,
How many teams in IndyCar?
God knows. I don't know. They've only got 3 cars. There's 10, 12 teams probably. But maybe a few less, 10 at least. So, it was wonderful. I was watching that until late last night. I was riveted to watching qualifying. Not even a race, but the drama. And Will Buxton's over there commentating. Talking a bit too much, Will, as always, the wonderful, fabulous, lovely, he's full of all the adjectives, but he does bring drama to his commentary. You can't take that away from him. But wall-to-wall commentating, as we know, is what seems to be wanted by the TV producers now. Drama aplenty. But the trouble is, when you watch, when you look at the car going round, there's no correction, obviously, at all. You can't visually see anything. So it looks like they're on rails. And it's only because you've seen those, 5 or 6 or 7 shunts and how quickly it can go wrong. So you're holding your breath. They do 4 laps to qualify. So that's, 16 corners that have to take flat out at 230 miles an hour to get on pole. And when Schwartzman was going round, I was sort of, just almost dreading that back end just suddenly stepping out and sending him into the wall at 230 miles an hour. So that's the thing about old Grand Prix racing, which they didn't overtake every lap, but there was so much poor reliability that even if someone was leading by 20 seconds, you were still tense because you've got will they make it? You listen to going past the pits. Is there a misfire coming? Will the gearbox break? And that was a bit like the qualifier. The cars are on rails, yet that they are. If you go 1 mile an hour faster through that corner, you're going to have that flipping great hybrid back end turning you into the wall. Wonderful.
Good stuff.
Coming back down to level ground now after that, it was the most amazing drama. I love it. And I was actually watching the 500 on the Sunday night somewhere in a bar in Nice, because I'm going to be at Monte Carlo. I'm entertaining on the boats with some corporate guests. I'll be down at the Monaco Grand Prix.
Who are you doing that with? You're doing with Motor Passion?
Motor Passion. The best. Come and join us at Motor Passion. We have some seats still for Spa. Still have some grandstand seats and some corporate hospitalities. So we go to the World Rally Championship in Portugal, where the Toyota Hyundai battle rages on. And it's been a bit of a Toyota fest recently, but Hyundai were battling back. Tanak got up to a 14-second lead and looked like he might get Hyundai back on the top step of the podium. But then he had power steering failure, which must just be a killer. The number of corners they have to go around, even if it's on loose gravel, the weight of the steering just pumps you up. And both the Toyotas of Sebastian Ogier and Kalle Rovanperä got past him. But on the Sunday, the final day, he managed to, with his power steering reattached, managed to get back past Rovanperä, pulling back a 13-second deficit to take second place. Well, dear Ogier went on to win his 7th Rally Portugal. Elfyn being championship leader, had to go first. on the road on day one, had this dreaded sweeping, you're first out on a gravel rally stage. And so he lost a lot of time. I think he was over a minute behind on the first day. And never really came back in other problems. So Elfyn ended up sixth, in fact, behind his Japanese teammate. The Irishman, Josh McCleary, I can't get it right, McAlean, I've got it finally. He was the first Ford home. Ford's really not on the pace of Toyota or Hyundai at all. But he had eighth. Was it good for him? And Gus Greensmith, the British driver that does WRC2, came third. Well done, Gus, with Oliver Solberg winning that in his Toyota. So entertaining as always, leaping through the famous stages. They had a 14-hour day in the car, which they're all a bit upset about. It's a bit like all the old-fashioned rally drivers. Hey, lad, Rally GB, we used to do 24 hours non-stop, clean car. Oh, I'm going to cough. But they were moaning 14 hours in the car, which in modern-day rallying is very rare indeed. And they did about over 100 miles of special stages and about 400 miles of driving around Portugal. I've guessed those numbers, by the way. Over to Tokyo, Formula E, which normally I just ignore. I watched it Saturday morning, and it was pouring with rain. And I am losing confidence in ever enjoying a Formula E race, to be honest. Especially now with their new, what's it called?
You got to charge halfway through.
No, that's the extra. Stop. I'm going to cough again. No, the attack mode.
Oh, yeah.
So now the attack mode has got not only an extra 50 kilowatts or 70 horsepower to you and me, it's a lot extra 70 horsepower. It's got four-wheel drive. So, of course, in the rain, when you did your attack mode, you just going past people. But also in the first race, because it was a double header, they're only using this as double headers. They had the refueling, or as they call it, pit boost, where you have to stop for 30 seconds to be plugged in at 600 kilowatt hours, all these letters I don't mean, which is a 10% boost. So it just meant that people were overtaking willy-nilly. Cars were in the pits getting plugged in. You didn't know what was going on. Oliver Rowland was dominating. It seems to be Formula Oliver Rowland at the moment. He was on pole position. He seemed to be leading most of the time I was watching until it went complicated. Then all of a sudden, Stoffel Vandoorne won it. And I don't know where he'd come from. He was 14th on the grid in his Maserati. I mean, they had the rain, they had virtuals, they had red flags out, and they were on the pit. It was so confusing that you couldn't really follow the race.
I'm amazed you thought it was entertaining, I'll be honest with you, because I watched it as well. And
the second race was the entertaining one.
Oh, okay.
No, so race one was typical Formula E, just don't know what's going on. Stoffel Vandoorne, it's the first race he's won since 2022, because last round at Monaco, of course, we had Sebastian Buemi having his first win since 2019, both former champions. And it's just everyone seems to win occasionally because it's a bit of a lottery. Oliver Rowland's got it sorted. Anyway, so the second race was no pit boost. It was dry. It wasn't what they call a peloton track. You didn't have to be slipstreaming everywhere to save power because the circuit layout was just about right. They had enough lift-offs to charge their own batteries. And again, it was Oliver Rowland on pole, and Oliver Rowland dominating the race, to be honest. But he was the one that really made it come alive because he took his time attack modes late and dropped to about sixth. Meanwhile, while he was down to about sixth, Dan Ticktum was leading. And Ticktum on the front row, qualified second, the enfant terrible of motorsport, loved and hated in equal manners. Now has Porsche power in his Cupra Curo, whatever the team it's called. So he was up there on the pace and took the lead while Rowland was at the pits. But not in the pits, getting his attack mode. But Rowland then got back into the lead. But because he'd sort of left it a bit late in his own description, he'd used up too much power almost. By the time he got to the lead, he's like, my fuel tank's nearly empty. So then he did the backing up thing, which you can do so easy in Formula E through his tight, tiddly circuits. So he then had about the next six were all on his back gearbox, which I know it's all a bit artificial, but it did make it look exciting because we had Ticktum, Pascal Wehrlein and Taylor Barnard, and they were going for some great overtaking moves. And it really was quite an exciting race. They were overtaking, having a go. So it was entertaining. The last 10 laps or so, until unfortunately, I forget it was Mortar or someone torpedoed Taylor Barnard, punched his rear left tire, took Taylor out, which is a real shame because Taylor, he's one of the discoveries of Formula E. I mean, we knew he was good in the single-seater and he should have been a Formula 2 car, a Red Bull Formula 3 car, but he got the opportunity to be a paid driver and go Formula E, so he took it. And he's been a real star of the series. So he was knocked out really sadly. Otherwise, it could have been a British 1-2-3 there. But as it was, Pascal Wehrlein got second from Dan Ticktum, who, when being interviewed,
I saw it,
was most excited because when they told him, you got the fan vote for the weekend. And he said, I thought everybody hated me, which certain element of
do you know he's a very unusual chap. I really, because I was quite vocal about I can't stand the way he swears and how he was with everyone, but he's just a bit special. But
he torpedoed someone in a Formula 4 race. Didn't he come up in a pace car? Was that him? Was that some other awful terrible? I think it was Ticktum, wasn't it? And he just went across the grass and T-boned someone that he didn't like.
Well, he. I mean, this weekend.
Am I getting that mixed up?
I don't think that was Dan Ticktum. I don't know.
Is that the American? Is that Ferrucci? I think it might have been Ticktum.
Dan Ticktum is, of course, known for his outbursts and
never his fault. Never his fault.
Get me a taxi. Got me a taxi now. But on the weekend, he did say that about Grand Prix drivers. He said there's about 7 that shouldn't be there in Formula 1, but he's not going to name them because he'll get cancelled again. Is what he said. I wonder who the 7 are. 7's quite.
Anyway,
harsh.
we want some more correspondence on our bottom of our YouTube channel. So you all tell us why you don't like Dan Ticktum or do like Dan Ticktum. So yes, for once, I watched 20 minutes of Formula E racing that was entertaining.
I'll tell you what I would do if I was team boss and I was paying these drivers when they travel. Lots of them, and Dan is in this. They look scruffy. They've got all mismatched of clothes.
What?
No,
you're going to make them travelling? What?
Yeah.
You're going to tell that to Lewis Hamilton so he doesn't turn up looking ridiculous.
Well, that winds me up as well when like Ferrari or a team and they've got lovely top half with their caps and their hat and then their shirts, and they've got all different coloured jeans. Some have got stonewashed, like ripped jeans, and some
you're in a right fashion mode, aren't you, darling? Dear, oh dear. I'll tell you what, you shoot.
This is the most unfashionable man ever that always wears a blue jumper.
Do shoot me, all the IndyCar commentators. I've seen this in other walks of fight, but they all wear suits and ties, grey suits, and then they have the white trainers on. If you ever see me in a suit with trainers on, shoot me.
Well, that's the trendy thing to do these days.
I know.
I did wear white shoes out on with grey pair of chinos on Saturday night after my padel tournament.
Anyway, back to America for NASCAR. Quick, short run. They had this all-star race, not a championship round. It's a $1 million takes-all win event, which has, I don't know who qualifies their heats and finals and semis. It was a little half-mile north Wilkesboro track. And it just ended this brilliant race that I was absolutely delighted for when Joey Logano was leading. And he was he was overtaken robustly by Christopher Bell, who went on to take the $1 million, stole $1 million off of Logano. And Joey, after he was so pissed off, Joey Logano has pushed more people off with his front bumper to take a win into the last corner of the last. He's the dirtiest driver in my books, along with Dirty Denny Hamlin. And he's taken Larson into the wall several times, either take the wall or overtake me. But I know he's pissed off because he dominated there. He had the quickest car. And even better, that I enjoyed even more, is that the promoter of this all-star race is allowed a promoter's yellow flag. So the rotor's boring because the yellow puts them all back in line, for a restart. And so he threw his yellow when Joey had a long lead with about 40 laps to go. And Joey decided not to change tyres. And so he did. And Christopher Bell was one of several front runners that did change tyres. And Christopher Bell caught him up. So Joey was just blocking and blocking and blocking. And eventually Christopher Bell got his nose up the inside, gave him a tap, moved him up. Then we got him halfway up and alongside, pushed him right up to the wall. There you are, Joey. We didn't put him in the wall like Joey used to do. And then disappeared to win the $1 million, stealing $1 million off of Joey's nose.
Wow.
And Logano, after he even said I was going to get back, if I could have got back to him, I'd have spun him out. He even admitted he would have done even worse than Christopher Bell did to him. So I'm sure I was delighted. He stole $1 million off of Joey Logano. Back to Europe, finally, World Superbikes. We always follow the bikes on this channel. We do like bike racing, but at the moment, World Superbikes is getting a bit dull because it's either Bulega or Razgatlioglu that's winning all the time. It was exactly the same in Most. Great looking track. Where the first race, it was Razgatlioglu, Bulega, Petrucci in a private Ducati. The second race was Razgatlioglu, Bulega, Petrucci. And the third race, Bulega, the third race was fantastic. He got him on the line, accelerated out the final corner. Bulega got a better run and beat him by 0.027 seconds. Alex Lowes was fourth in his Kawasaki in race 1, and brother Sam Lowes was fourth in races 2 and 3. So the trouble with World Superbikes, we just get the same result weekend after weekend. Occasionally great racing, but spread out. You know, he won the first race.
Yeah, but you can say that for MotoGP as well.
Yeah, but that's Marc Marquez. And Marc Marquez always brings drama. You can say MotoGP. You're right. You are right.
Jorge Martin has announced that he's not going to be on the Aprilia next year as well, which quite big news.
I hope he's got a good lawyer then.
Yeah, I know. But it's a weird thing to announce so early on, isn't it? I mean, how do you, like Lewis last year with Mercedes, it was so early that it can't be good for team morale.
Well, they've got these performance clauses, haven't they? If I'm not leading the championship half season, and of course, because he's been in hospital half the season, he's not leading any championship. So it's a results-based contract normally, isn't it? If I haven't got so many points, I can leave.
Right.
So while they didn't get a three-peat, as the Americans would call it, from Razgatlioglu in Czechoslovakia, we had a three-peat at Donington as the World Superbikes returned. Obviously, before you're on the heavy cloud, memories of Alton Park still very, very strong and hard. So they had to get back on the bikes at Donington, entertain. And it was this returning former champion, Bradley Ray, who went to Superbikes and didn't really get on with them. World Superbikes, I mean, on his Yamaha, who had the three-peat, won all three of the races. He beat Kyle Ryde, reigning champion, by 1.7 seconds in the first straight, beat him by 1.1 seconds in the second race. And then the third race, he just held on ahead of Glenn Irwin on a Ducati by 0.396 seconds. So won all three, but by an ever-closing matter.
It was nice. As you can imagine, nice tributes. The good crowd was amazing, and I'm a big fan of the BSB guys as well that run that. Like you say, under a black cloud, but as good as it can be. It has to go on. I've always said to you, any film we ever do that's even remotely risky, if anything happens to me, still publish it because we might actually get some views.
Yeah, that reminds me of my Top Gear story I did with Frankie, with Chris and the other two, Flintoff, that's on the cutter and flying. I did another item. I was going to be back on Top Gear for a one-off. The other series we followed, still in Europe, Zandvoort, the GB3 teams, which we follow because it's one of the most exciting single-seater formulas outside of F2 and F3.
And we got our young prodigy, Freddie.
But not Freddie. But not
Oh,
there.
no, he's not Zandvoort. Sorry, he's not Zandvoort.
So the rest of the company were probably very happy that Freddie Slater didn't turn up. And Freddie was actually busy winning a Freca round over in Spa, but finishing way down the field in the second race. I don't know what happened to him. I think he went out early on. So a good race and a bad race for Freddie and Freca. Freddie Freca champion.
Freca Freddie.
But it is a really exciting championship, and the Australians won the first three different winners. Patrick doesn't sound very Australian. Herzenruder, which I can't pronounce correctly, won the first race with our British kid, that's the promising star coming up to the ranks, apart from Freddie Slater, Deegan Fairclough, who, of course, won the Autosport BRDC award last winter, finishing second. Second race, another Australian, Alex Ninovich, again Fairclough. No, Fairclough was third this time. And then in the final race, reverse grid, the German Hugo Schwarzer won with the Fairclough top Brit in fourth. So really a good weekend for getting points for Fairclough. And of course, we're always interested in this series because Abby Pulling, the champion, winning everything in F1 Academy, has been brought down to earth with a bang. She had some good runs in the first round at Silverstone Grand Prix circuit, she knows. I think she was 9th, or 8th. But she had 2 13ths and 11th. So Abby's got a lot to do to shape up
But
against the
don't you
boys.
think that's impressive? I think that's actually quite impressive.
No. Top 10, yes. There's only about 20 cars or 17 cars. I think if you're down in 13th, you're not having a good weekend. Let's be honest.
If you finish 13th in occasion race, you're delighted because there's about 50 of them.
So yeah, really great weekend. It was different. I mean, this is what I love when we chat about them. We do this podcast because we want to open people's eyes to all the other forms of motorsport that are entertaining out in the world, and give credit where credit's due.
So we got you live in Monaco next week.
I'll be down
amazing
drinking champagne with guests on a boat, watching the tops of helmets go past on the crash barriers, trying to explain to my corporate guests that have spent a fortune being there what's going on. That's my job.
Well, can I just qualify, just in case Steve is listening, that you don't spend a fortune to go with Motor Passion because they're incredibly good value for money, and you can have Tiff Nadell as your host.
Yeah. Oh yeah, a budget fortune, but still quite pricey.
In our world,
Formula 1, Formula 2 and 3 at Monaco all weekend, which is spectacular, but not in the overtaking sense of the word. They're running this new compulsory 2 stops, which might create one.
Oh, I think that's good. I think it's exactly.
But they should have made them use the red, white, and yellow tyres.
One each
for each stint. I think that would have made it more interesting because I think the soft tyre only lasts about 6 laps, so that would make them all run in for qualifying. Of course, qualifying will be the thing, and see how close qualifying is now. Can Charles Leclerc, the Ferrari Monaco?
No chance.
You never know.
No chance, never know. Tiff. It's so far off the pace.
The marshals will put yellow flags out when everyone else comes past.
Maybe.
Then, of course, the Indy 500 on Saturday night, which, with Charles Schwartzman on.
There's always Monaco Indy that weekend.
Yeah, because you get a colourful procession followed by a real motor race with more overtaking than the whole 5 years of Formula One, probably. MotoGP, of course, at home at Silverstone. So if you know, there's so much going on. Also in Britain, in Britain, you've got MotoGP at Silverstone, or you can do the BTCC at Snetterton, or you can do the British GT at Alton Park, or you can go up to Scotland to watch the Pro Bike British Rally Championship at Duns in the Jim Clark Rally. So there's just so much motorsport on this weekend. You really don't know what to say or what to do. But I'd record the Monaco Grand Prix because it'll be boring and you can just fast forward through it. Go to either BT Snetterton or Scotland for rallying, or wherever, British Alton. So go to your British or Silverstone for MotoGP, and then come home and catch up with the NASCAR from Charlotte late at night. So much joy.
I'm hoping that the Grand Prix is actually going to bring some excitement because you're going to have a lot of jeopardy. When do you pit? Do you do the undercut? Do you do the overcut? 2 stops now.
The things I hate though is VSCs. Coming out, right when the leader's gone past. He's gone past the pit entry. Again, don't throw a virtual safety car just after the leader's started another lap, because then the leader drops to about 10th. That's what I fear so much with the modern day rule makers, that they'll throw a virtual safety car at the wrong time, give someone a win that they didn't really deserve. But yeah, the pit lane, I don't know.
Who's going to win? Okay, so let's have a little wager then. Who's going to win?
You close the pit. That's the Americans. You close the pit lane when you have a virtual safety car. You don't let anybody in.
Yes, absolutely.
It's the same
absolutely.
at Imola. That virtual safety car, some jumped up 3 or 4 places or lost 3 or 4 places because others took advantage of pits. Absolutely. Close the pit door.
100%. Who's going to win?
Max.
Yeah. It's hard to bet against him, isn't it?
Now, the great thing for us is, although it's now a 3-driver championship, really. The way he's come forward, it's not going to be the McLaren walkthrough that everyone thought. Just which of the 2 McLaren drivers is going to be world champion? Because I fear neither of them is going to be world champion. The way Max and Red Bull are sorting things out.
Who's going to finish higher out of Lando and Oscar?
Oh. Oscar, probably. I like him. He's great. I just fear that he has got the mental advantage over Lando. I think it's a mental advantage more than the physical way, more than the speed.
At that standard, it's the same as most top sport is a mental thing. Golf is the same. What about Lewis and Charles?
What, championship by the end?
No. Monaco.
Oh, Monaco. Oh, Charles beat Lewis around Monaco.
And finally, Alex and Carlos.
Ooh, I always have to go for Alex. I love that. Alex is one of the wonderful characters in
Well,
motorsports.
both of them. Wow, what a team they are.
Yeah,
They both are super,
yeah.
super, super nice guys. Um, cool. All right. Well, I shall.
So have a great weekend watching motorsport wherever, whether it's live in UK, getting behind the fences, or on telly or wherever.
Oh no! Now I've got to try and end this. Right, if we're going to try and stop it, because last time he was still on it. Oh, you
Yeah, I'm not
didn't
going to
know.
say anything. Yeah, I'm not going to say anything bad. I'm going to sit in there. Wait.
Sit there in peace. Thanks for joining.